Okay, so today we're going to talk about the meaning crisis again. And today I'm going to talk more about how anthroposophy is a solution to the meaning crisis. And I want to credit John Vervaeke for continuously talking about the meaning crisis, which he's been doing for many years now, actually. Um, and he's written books on it, and he's experimented with it with his students, just kind of asking the students questions to see where they're at in their life and the meaning that they're getting out of life. And there's so much to address with the meaning crisis. But what I would say is, or what John would say, from what I've heard, is um, how do we have purpose in our lives? How do we have significance in our lives? How do we have what he calls mattering, which is being connected to something larger than yourself? How do we have sacred moments in our lives? What is sacred for us? Um, and how much of a difference do we make in that sacredness of the world? Um, and this increases the mattering by having these sacred moments with others or with something bigger than ourselves, like God. And John, when he discusses a lot of these things, um, he uses his background in cognitive science. He's also a Neoplatonist, and he says he's a Neoplatonist with a combination of Zen, but not necessarily Zen Buddhism. Um, he was raised as a fundamentalist Christian, and he has gone through the Eastern path, which many of us do, by the way. Many of us who are raised Catholic and Christian, we need to go, some of us need to go back to a different, completely different view of the world, an Eastern view of the world through Hinduism and Buddhism before we can then come back to Christianity. And right now we have a movement of people who are coming back to Christianity in a way that is really sort of magical if you think of um, watching this happen in real time as people come into some kind of understanding of Christ. Now, whether that understanding is rooted in reality, or is going down the right or the wrong path, is up for interpretation by anthroposophists and people who believe that they have the answers to these questions. But we have to be humble, and we have to think long term. We have to be patient. We have to understand that it's a long process to come to spiritual science and anthroposophy. Um, you need to, some people need to go down many different rabbit holes on YouTube, and you can get caught up in a lot nowadays. And I think that is a huge issue. But you can also come to spiritual science through these different rabbit holes and through the internet, through your YouTube algorithm, that type of thing. It can pop up for you, and then you can find what you're finally looking for. And I think that we have to be patient because the searching for the answers is part of the process. Thinking that coming to a type of knowing and then realizing that that doesn't work is part of the process to searching for the truth. And true anthroposophists, people who are meant to come to anthroposophy, I think, have to go through this process of continuously striving and trying to find the truth rather than getting stuck in a world of um, abstractions. And we want to search for what's behind the abstraction. And that brings me to John's work. I think that when he explains these things, he's giving terminologies, right? He's laying out the definitions, and I think to his credit, in some ways, he is not going deeper into the full picture because he's seeing these things as a personal relationship with God, and he doesn't want to go into what that looks like for him, what that looks like for you, what it should look like, what it shouldn't look like. I completely respect that. And I think that actually is the right attitude. We should never force anything on anyone. Um, we should never, tell someone this is what you should do or shouldn't do. This is your path. And I think John does a really good job of doing that. But in some ways, according to Rudolf Steiner, of course, which anthroposophy is really based on his communication with the spiritual world, with higher beings, beings who are exalted and revered and much higher than any human can reach to in terms of being a spiritual master or a guru or something like that. That's not what Steiner really is. Steiner is a clairvoyant, and he was put on the earth by higher beings and communicated through by higher beings to give us what we need for the present moment and time. And what we do need is a deeper understanding of the spirit. And that's, again, it's according to Rudolf Steiner. Some people can say, isn't that a little bit of a, um, sort of someone who is saying they know everything and has all the answers? Not really, because Steiner never really mentions himself in any of this stuff. He's speaking from an objective point of view. Um, he literally he will never say like, I think this and this is why I think this. Um, he speaks from a different viewpoint that is completely separate from his ego or his lower ego or his earthly ego or anything like that. And so when you listen to it, it's pure logic, right? It's pure spirit. Um, and so it's not abstract. It just makes sense. It just makes so much sense. But again, some people are not ready to go down that path, and that's okay. You can go and go around to different people and gurus and Ram Dass and Alan Watts and you know um, John Pagu and King's North and all these people, right? Different Christian people and Eastern views, and you can sort of skip around and you can get some really good stuff out of that. Really good. Good wisdom. Just like John says, we need wisdom, we need something sacred. And maybe for you, that's just prayer and maybe showing love to others, right? Reading the Bible. If you read the Gospels and you try to employ that in your life, you are headed down a really good path. And some people don't fully feel like they need to go into a deeper aspect, but some people do. And those people, spiritual science is here for you. And so let's get into it. Let's talk about why anthroposophy is the solution to the meaning crisis. And yeah, so John talks about what's sacred. Um, and I believe that spiritual science because it gives us such a deep understanding esoterically of Christ, of the Gospels, of the celestial hierarchies, um, just understanding that we are part of the hierarchies, that we are evolving into an angel. That's our next step. Just understanding that gives you so much devotion. It creates a sacredness in your own life. Um, and it gives you a path to have a mattering, as John would say. Um, but the Gospels, Steiner, he goes through the Gospels in a very deep esoteric way. And there's things in there that would shock some people, and scare some people, and but it would also brings it brings love to you to fully understand what Christ did and really understand that it did happen. He did do these things on the earth, and how much went into that from the spiritual world. And the Gospels are esoteric documents. They are occult documents, which means hidden. There's hidden truths within the Gospels. And I think many people know this, but there are many wrong interpretations of this. Some people use it as an interpretation of like more of a Gnostic view, where it's just like numbers and planets, and how does this associate with my cell salts and the salts of salvation of the zodiac and things like that. Um, from Steiner's point of view, it is a more Christian. Uh, it's really a future Christianity that we're heading into, and that's kind of where he is anchored in the future of Christianity, where Christ is within us, and we are cultivating Christ's essence and deeds and love to other people into the future. And Christ is becoming closer and closer to us. Um, and so that's some of the stuff that Steiner has given us. He's also given us spiritual exercises and meditation. This is a huge thing. And this is what John would say is um, transformative rituals, right? So, these meditation exercises that Steiner has given us, which there's a book called Start Now, a book of spiritual and meditation exercises, I believe it's called. Christopher Banford with Rudolf Steiner. He just basically takes excerpts of different portions of Steiner's work, and it's really helpful for beginners, especially page 98 to 120 in that book. So that really shows you how to live life. Um, it's like the 6 essential exercises, which also is on my YouTube video. I do a lot of stuff with like beginner anthroposophy, spiritual scientific things, because I think it's actually one of the most important things that we can do. And I haven't necessarily gotten too deep into any of the esoteric stuff, because I believe it's really just more important to get people on board in a sort of slow and intro sort of way. So it really instills this way of living. It really instills logical thinking. It instills morality. It instills responsibility in life. And so John often talks about conspirituality, and sometimes I think he buckets occult and esoteric things in that conspirituality, as he calls it, which is like a conspiracy sort of spirituality. Um, and so he buckets that into that, but he talks about logical thinking. He's a very logical person. He talks about reasoning, the importance of reason, in understanding the world. Um, and he actually does believe that um, this reasoning and analyzing um, is a way of accessing the deeper, more fundamental reality that underlies the world we experience. Similar to the Plato's idea of theory of recollection, um, where knowledge is seen as a recollection of eternal, unchanging truths. So he's a Neoplatonist, um, is what he calls himself, and but he's very grounded. He wants people to not just go into a spiritual heights, where we're pulled, into this sort of spiritual height where we think everything's a conspiracy, um, and if you don't agree, you're cast out, and everything becomes political and sort of things of that nature. And I've gone down that path before, and I can even name, certain channels that I believe sort of are in that camp. Alpha Vedic community, which by the way is part of the reason that I was introduced to anthroposophy, because I've fallen down those rabbit holes as well. So I understand. And I still think they put out really good work. So it's not something that I just dismiss. We do need to understand the deeper truths. And sometimes conspiracies are true. A lot of times actually they are true. They end up being true. So we need to understand that as well. He talks about the Neoplatonist view, right? He believes that the world is a hierarchical system with different levels of reality that are interconnected and interdependent. He draws on Plato's idea of the allegory of the cave, where the world we experience through our senses is just a shadow or reflection of a higher, more fundamental reality. So this is exactly the case. I think that he basically stops there, though. It's an abstraction, right? He's saying, yes, there is this higher reality, but we don't really have the right. Not that he says this directly, and I don't know if this is how he puts it, but maybe that we don't have the right to know exactly what's happening um, in full consciousness. And what Rudolf Steiner would say is that we do need to do that because we're on a spiritual evolutionary pathway that he lays out the entire thing. And right now we're in a consciousness soul. So we need to become conscious within our soul, um, of the spirit, conscious of the spirit behind everything, behind us, behind the world, behind the cosmos, behind everything around us, animals, plants, etc. Um, and I think that anthroposophy would also say we need to understand a deeper sense for and increased knowledge for evil forces, that Steiner would say would be Lucifer and Ahriman. And he would say that we are interacting with these forces. These forces are down with us. It's not just like, they're out there, right? Because if we think they're just out there, and we don't have anything to do with them, then, we sort of push the blame constantly, right, onto someone else. Oh, the evil's out there. It's the Hamas, it's the terrorists, it's the evil, empire, it's the elites, it's the techno feudalist elites, whatever. Constantly pushing, it's a politician, it's the big pharma, it's the big food, it's the big whatever. Always pushing the evil out. And Steiner would say that that's not how we need to see it. And so would Carl Jung, by the way, who talks about the shadow, right? And if you listen to Alan Watts talk about his interaction with Carl Jung, you can type that in on YouTube. Agrippa's Diary, I believe, has a YouTube video, where it's a speech from Alan Watts talking about this sort of shadow, and talking about this very concept of pushing the evil out and not really embracing it. I don't know if he interprets it exactly correct, so I'm not going to say, but to me, I got a lot out of it. So that's a really good thing to look at. Um, But we need to experience these things in full consciousness and truth. There were secrets that were hidden from the masses for thousands of years. And mystery centers. There's been mystery centers that have gone throughout the world, giving initiations to people. And, you would have a high priest or a guru or something, that someone who would initiate you into the mysteries of the world. And the teachings of those mystery centers is now anthroposophy and is now available to the public. Since 1899, we have ended in the age of Kali Yuga, which went from 3101 BC to 1899 AD. And so since that point, you can see in Steiner's work how it transitions from a theory of knowledge, a philosophy of freedom, to more theosophy, occult science, knowledge of higher worlds, Christianity as mystical fact. Why was he able to give these truths? It's because we're now in the age of light, and it's a new era, where the Archangel Michael has cemented himself as the ruler of this new age of light, as the first archangel to guide us into the future. And it's also because in 1879, Michael in the spiritual world, he fought the dragon, which is Ahriman, or Satan in a more Christian terminology, and he cast Satan down out of heaven, which we all know the story, right? In the Catholic Church, and that's why we pray the Archangel Michael prayer, and we say, that's that Satan is seeking the ruin of souls, right? And that Michael can protect us from that. And this is true. This is the case, right? And so, it's, again, we sort of think of it as like, oh, he's out there and all this stuff. It's not the case. We interact with these beings, but we also have the Christ, and the Christ is the center point of these two beings. Lucifer, who wants to pull us out into a spirituality and just, leave the world, and, oh, don't worry about your job, and, oh, you'll be able to retire, and by the time you're 40, so that you can just study spiritual stuff and not have to worry about the world, right? And that's so Luciferic, sort of trying to pull us out of our evolution. What we need in Christ, and what John would say, John Vervaeke, is that yes, we need to be in the world, right? And that's what Christ said. And he said we need to be in the world, but not of the world. And the of the world portion is Ahriman. That's materialism. That is the tech revolution, transhumanism, things like this. So there's these two poles, and Christ is in the middle, and that's who we are, becoming. And Christ is infinitely more powerful than these adversaries, and so there's nothing to fear. In fact, these adversaries are necessary for our evolution, right? If you think about I can't think of the name of it, but that Stoic or sort of Roman or Greek philosopher who's pushing the boulder up the hill, right? And he's saying, I'm getting stronger from pushing this boulder up the hill. That is the concept of these two adversarial beings. They make us better and stronger, and they are a necessary part of our human evolution. Without Lucifer, we could not have our freedom, and without Ahriman, we couldn't have this right here. No one would ever find anything. You would just live, and you would, and in some cases, he has made us more individual, but Christ is ever more individualizing our ego so that we can give our love away in free love towards others. And that's really what we're trying to do. We come from a universal ego in the very, very ancient time, and we're now ascending into a more individual ego. And then eventually we give that love away to others through that ego. Um, but we have been more isolated in things by technology, by social media, which maybe has brought us closer to Christ and a personal relationship with Christ, which is what we're all cultivating. And so it can be a scary thing to think that these beings are around. And but again, Christ is just infinitely more powerful. That's what Steiner has said. It's infinite. You can't actually measure it. But again, these are necessary parts of our being and our life. And the issue is, and the reason why this information has to come out more and more is because certain truths can be and are being used against the population. Since 99.9% of people are not clairvoyant, right? They can't see into the spiritual world. And we live in such a materialist time with all these screens and electromagnetic frequencies and things like that, that it's very hard now to become a fully realized clairvoyant like Steiner. And in some ways, he was sort of the last kind of full clairvoyant, if you will. And there was a lot at that time. And I think that was because the spiritual world was trying to send as many of these high sort of beings down before this sort of ramp up in technology and in all of these things that in some ways take away the ability for us to have that clairvoyance. And so without being able to differentiate these two beings, Satan and the devil, Lucifer, sorry, Satan would be Ahriman and the devil would be Lucifer. And you can actually even see this in the Bible too. When you see Satan, it's talking about Ahriman. Because, when Peter says, no, Jesus, we don't want you to go. Like, we really want you to stay here on earth. He's saying, get behind me, Satan. Because Peter is clinging to the material sort of Jesus, right? He's clinging to the material Jesus and the earth. And so that's why he's using the term Satan there. And the devil is more like the tempter, right? The Luciferic temptation. The whore, if you will, or the sort of temptress or things of that nature, can be seen as the Luciferic force. So humanity really is thirsting for these truths more and more to understand spirituality in full consciousness. But as society is continuing to break down socially, culturally, economically, we may be headed in the wrong direction in so many different ways. With artificial intelligence coming in, people do have this meaning crisis, right? And that's, again, what John is addressing so well. And so how can we overcome it? I don't think we can just overcome it with sort of abstractions of saying we need purpose and cultivation of wisdom and ecology of practice and going back to Platonism and Stoicism and mindfulness and to going backwards in our evolution is not really going to work. And that's going to only bring the forces of decline more and more into our lives. And so it's such a blessing that spiritual science was given to the world, and it happened. It's over. It already happened. It's all there. It can't be stopped. It's on the rise. It's on the mend. It's a moving, real thing that is living and happening in the world. And so, again, cultivating understanding, true understanding of our past is also a huge thing. We're on a massive evolutionary curve spiritually. not just physically. Um, and so, as part of this spiritual evolution, we've evolved through eons of time. And we have to understand where we are to understand where we're going, and what we need to be trying to do. And all of this brings meaning. All of this brings purpose. To have a full understanding of where we're going, what we're doing, where we're like where we've been, right? If we we need to orient ourselves spiritually. Um, like John says, John Vervaeke, right? He talks about having this orientation, um, and having a significance, having a purpose, and even more, right? He talks about transformative rituals. Another thing that spiritual science brings is the calendar of the soul. And if you're a beginner, I'd recommend checking that out. Every week, Rudolf Steiner created a verse that you meditate on. And this verse has to do with the world and your own spirit and soul. And it's so unique and so beautiful. Um, you can think of it as like this, it's following the sun's path and the inner sun, which is our spirit. And when the spirit in the sun is darkest outside, it's the strongest within us. So December 21st, that's when around Christmas time, that's really the celebration of Christmas, is that the Spirit and Christ is coming as closer to us. And then June 21st, when the Spirit is the farthest away, is the St. John's Day, St. John's celebration, celebration of the Spirit, celebration of the Spirit in the sense realm, in nature, the Spirit in nature too. Like you can see that the Spirit is the furthest away from nature as well, December 21st around Christmas, because the plants and the trees in some ways are the opposite of us. They're flipped. And so the Spirit is most present in them um, in summer, right? And then in the winter, the Spirit sort of goes into the earth, or it goes into us, right? So you could see us as sort of that earth. And the calendar of the soul brings this sort of festival feeling and meaning to different times of the year that we can follow and we participate in. We have a participatory knowing, as John would also say, through this calendar of the soul. And so there's so much more, right, that I could say. I would just say that spiritual science, um, it has a life-creating energy for us. And for the whole evolution of the world and of humanity, it is necessary. And according to Steiner, again, according to him, right, spiritual science, which he has given to the world through the higher beings, is the third revelation given by the spiritual worlds. And he says that Moses on Mount Sinai, St. John, and then spiritual science. And so, you can look at it as the commandments, revelation, and then spiritual science. And spiritual science is here to cultivate the understanding and the comprehension of the mystery of Golgotha and what happened when Christ united himself to the earth and to us for the rest of the earth's evolution till the end of the earth. and even past that to all of the next incarnations of the earth, that he united himself to that process. And this can help us understand current events that are happening, because Steiner has predicted a lot of these things. The falling away of the earth, the nationalism on the rise, technology on the rise, um, you know, so many big cultural movements that he sort of predicted, and also the increase in anxiety. He predicted that as well, because he said that materialism, it only lasts for 2 generations. So it's the generation who started it, and then the next generation, and then that's it. After that, we then start to decline if we don't come out of it. So we have to imbue this materialistic scientific view with the spirit. That's what spiritual science is for. And if spiritual science is not heard, humanity's evolution cannot occur in the way that is intended by higher spiritual beings. And ultimately, spiritual science can help us to find the Christ, to meet the Christ face to face, to meet Christ face to face, and where he is. Where is he now? Where will he be? How can we find him? These are all the things that spiritual science brings to the world. And I hope that you've gotten a deeper sense for spiritual science and what it can bring to the world and to all of our lives individually. It gives us truly a moral and a higher sense, higher reason for life and for living. And it gives us purpose and it gives us meaning. And that's what I wanted to say today. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.